thought there would be a little bit more black in the black horse. Apparently that's all that was graphed. I guess it's going to be mostly a blue-black horse. But I was a little nervous about this one, but the shading is actually coming out kind of cool. This whole thing I've been a little bit iffy about because I was a little bit worried the colors were going to be kind of faint. But this is one of those trust the process canvases, I guess. So I don't know. When you step back though, I do kind of like how the green one is sort of up in the clouds. Looks like sort of a dust cloud turning into a horse. That's kind of cool. But I'm still a little bit nervous about if the definition is going to come out on the black horse, because all these other ones you can see where the mane is and everything, and black horse here you can see like the tip of the nose just starting to shape, but everything else is like a big old void. I think I can kind of make out the eye here a little bit, but I'm hoping that one doesn't get lost in the background, but we'll see. We'll come back in a little bit. Alright, buenas noches, honey badgers. It's a little bit later at night from that last clip you just saw. Got a clean kitchen, got animals with full bellies, I got some tea, I got some extra progress on this, so let's have a little nighttime chat. Let's see, where did I leave off? I think I was talking about this. This needed to be filled in, but it's probably going to be dark blue. I was mentioning up here, or maybe I didn't mention it in that video, but I was thinking about it, about how I was worried about this horse blending in too much with the background since it's all the same color, because I did a bunch of filling in after I got that first section caught up or worked on, and I realized I'm down to like just a handful of colors now, so there's not a lot of detail colors I have going up there anymore. It's pretty much, there's a few colors going in on the horses, but the background is pretty much down to like 2 colors now. So I'm a little bit worried that the top of the head is going to get lost since it's all the same color. So I'm thinking what I may do, looking at this, it looks like, see, all this J is supposed to be 939, I think, and it goes all the way up here, but there's a little bit of a gap in here, and I'm thinking what was originally intended was that this was supposed to be a little bit of a mane up here on the dark horse, and then some coloring in the sky, but it's all the same color. So what I thought I could maybe do to sort of give it a little extra definition is do the standard 939 in the face, but then maybe do a really super dark gray up here, and then do the dark blue up in there again, but just make this part here where a mane would be a little bit dark gray so that it looks more like a mane and it's not just going to be what's going to look like maybe a bunch of cloud cover or something, because everybody else's mane is kind of coming out. I'd like for that one to have some detail. So yeah, I'll probably work on that tomorrow. Not going to do that right now. I figured tonight for the WIP and chat I would do the red tones. There's 3 red tones, I think, so there's a little bit down in here, and then some on the design piece up here, and then mainly in the red horse there. So I figured I'd start with the 900, which I believe is the D symbol, and this is, whoops, where am I? There we go. Okay, this is originally what was in the kit, but I found a little bit of this other color, which is pretty close. It's just a shade off from what came in the kit, but I was thinking it's just a little bit, so sometimes you find those random spares in your stash where you're like, I should just use this color on something, or maybe that's just me, I don't know. There's a lot of diamond painters now who don't really save a lot of their drills, but if you are a saver type of person in the diamond community, I don't know if you run into that where you're like, oh yeah, I have this random color I saved from something. So what I'm thinking I might do is start with this and do it in the sort of frontis piece here, and whatever's left maybe down in here, and then work my way up, and see how far I get along with this. And then what I may do, let me see here, it doesn't look like there's any of the 900 down in here actually. Now that I'm looking at it, it looks like it's mainly here and in the ears and in the face. So yeah, I'll probably start here, maybe go up here and see how far that takes me with the little bit I have in here, and then whatever's left I will fill in with what actually came with the kit. So we'll start with that, see where that gets us. So, okay, let's get a little bit set up here. Where's my tray? Okay. So I wanted to do a little chat about this RaptureTok thing, because it's just, I mentioned in that other video when I was talking about how watching all of that RaptureTok stuff on YouTube, though, because I mentioned in that video, I think I titled that video RaptureTok Detour or something like that. I'll link it down below. But how I was talking about how I got caught up in the rabbit hole of watching all of these RaptureTok compilations on YouTube, because I mentioned in that video that I don't have TikTok myself, but every so often there's like a topic that happens over there that gets so big and has everybody talking that ultimately people start making compilation videos and bringing them over to YouTube. So yeah, I'm still not compelled to have a TikTok. I think there are good things that have come out of TikTok, but a lot of it just feels really unhinged over extended periods of time. I think there are plenty of people that are very lighthearted about it and just have fun with it, and then they can close it out at the end of the day or whatever. But there are some people that just get weirdly attached to it, to where they almost act like they don't know how to function if that program is not there. And that unnerves me a little bit. But yeah, every so often, I did a quick video a while back where I was talking about when I was watching all those videos about the clean talk and how people got obsessed with cleaning to the point of endangering their bodies basically, and risking chemical burns because they got obsessed with all of these random chemicals that clean talk people were putting in their videos. And I remember when that conversation came up, that alarmed me, and I made a little bit of a video about that. And for the most part, I don't pay a lot of attention to what happens over there. I kind of stay in my lane with a lot of social media. I try, even though I'm a millennial, I try not to sound too boomer about it, I guess, where I'm just like, these new technologies. But it's not so much that I'm like scared of technology or anything. It's just, I think when you start getting older, you start needing that stuff less and less, and you get much more content with just the little things that make you happy. And so you have a little bit of social media here and there so that you can interact with people that you don't have in your immediate vicinity. At least that's how I look at it. And then you have to find a way to just shut it down and go offline and be one with whatever. I know some people aren't nature people, but like, find a craft, find something that's offline that you can sink your focus into, and I promise you it's so much better for your mental health if you don't put all of your eggs in the social media basket. But when people do get like that, this whole RaptureTok thing, that's like taking the frenzy of getting caught up in social media and social media addiction and all that, and then combining it with religious fervor and religious psychosis and all of that. And it's fascinating from a psychology point of view. And also, if you've grown up anywhere in like the church circuit, just listening to people's logic is kind of amusing. So just getting into, I'll start with some of the more lighthearted stuff, because there were a few videos I saw in this topic where it got pretty sad actually. But I think the first one I saw was just like not really lighthearted, but like less intense ones where it was just like people selling their cars and stuff. And that was sort of my introduction to it, where I was like, okay, I feel like you're gonna need that, but all right. I guess my hesitation with this whole topic is I I mentioned in that other video I did about the getting inspired to do these canvases because of watching all these RaptureTok videos. In that short video, I mentioned that when I was a kid, my primary job through most of my teenage years was I worked at, in shorthand, we called it a Bible camp. It wasn't really like the summer Bible camp thing like your local churches put on, where it's just like a community room and you just do classes. This was like like high end. You had to have some money, or your parents had to pay some money for you to go to the programs in this. The official name of it was a Bible Conference Center or Bible Conference Grounds. I forget what they put on the sign, but it was like a luxury camping place where people would come, and we did summer camps in the summer, and then in the fall and winter we switched to more luxury adult retreat type things where we had to do these fancy dinners, and they would have Christian celebrity guest speakers come in and do all kinds of stuff. And so yeah, I worked there for the majority of my teenage years. And I mentioned in the other video that part of the thing about being an employee there, even the kids, we all had to go to Bible studies. We had to go to regular church services. Our camp director assigned us the Left Behind series, all that kind of stuff. And so we were familiar, and this was back in like the mid to late 90s up to like the early 2000s ish. So we were, versed in the whole Rapture storyline. And I mentioned in the other video that even back then, even though we were getting these sort of classes and stories and stuff about the Rapture, even then, teenage me was looking at it as just a story idea. I didn't put a whole lot of stock into it, mainly because, I've told you guys that I grew up around all different kinds of faiths. So many people in my family. The church was always around, but there was always different aspects of it. Like my great-grandfather was a Navy chaplain, and my grandfather was my great-grandfather, as in my maternal mother's father, was a Navy chaplain. And then when my grandma, right before my grandma met my grandpa, as in I'm trying to figure out how to explain this to obviously people who don't know my family. My grandpa is in my mom's dad. When he married my grandmother, the daughter of the Navy chaplain, his history in the past was that he was actually studying to be a priest prior to World War II. And then when the war came around, he decided to ditch that idea and went into the military instead, and met my grandmother during World War II. But he never really lost his religious interest or his religious beliefs. And he was somebody that I kind of talked to this kind of stuff about with, because he studied in seminary, and the rapture was never something he put a lot of stock into. It was never something he really talked about. I would mention it whenever I'd go to visit my grandparents, and sometimes it would come up in conversation, and he would just sit there like, huh, okay. And it was just, I don't know, it wasn't something he put a lot of stock into, so it wasn't something I got caught up in either. I mentioned in the other video, I felt it was more like a morality tale, where it's like, if you don't, because the concept is that the good people will be raptured up to heaven, and then whoever's left behind is supposed to be sort of doomed to whatever hellscape this mortal coil turns into. That's the rough idea of it. So to me it felt more than anything just like sort of a morality tale of like, well, you don't want to be the left behind ones. And to be honest, I hadn't really given the Rapture story much thought since then. Through most of my adulthood, I mean, I never really forgot about it, but it was something more that every so often I would throw around as a joke, where, you know, if you sometimes if you're going somewhere and all of a sudden you can't find your friends, or you know, your party you're with or whatever, or you know, sometimes you come in the house and the house is empty, and the person, you know, if your spouse is gone or whatever, sometimes you throw out the joke of like, oh shit, I thought everybody got raptured all of a sudden, that kind of thing. It was always more of like a comedic thing, but other than that, I hadn't really given it much thought. And then this year, all of a sudden, it comes up where suddenly everybody is talking about it, but super seriously. And at first, I was like, "What the hell?" That's like that thing from the '90s. Are people still getting caught up in that? And so that's why I got sort of interested in like, what the hell's going on TikTok? And that's when I started seeing all the stories of people, and all the people that were coming out and saying, yeah, the Lord put this on my heart. And I don't know if it's because I've lived in the South so long. I will admit, it's not that I won't hear you out, I won't let you say your piece, but I will admit there is a part of me that if you say the Lord put this on my heart, especially in a Southern accent, when it is completely unprompted, I will be mentally sprinkling a whole salt load of skepticism on whatever follows that. Because it tends, at least in the South, tends to be pretty common that whatever comes after the Lord put this on my heart, it tends to be something that's really none of that person's business, but they want to find a way in. And so they're like, oh, the Lord put it on my heart to talk to you about this. I'm like, I bet he did. Not. So yeah, and I was hearing a lot of Southern ladies were showing up in these compilation videos talking about the Lord put it on my heart. And I'm like, oh Lord, here we go. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because I've certainly had it. I know what it means, like when they say it, because I've certainly had situations where I've felt compelled by something that I feel is not me, but you know, it'll this higher power of voice will compel me to go help somebody that hasn't maybe been particularly kind to me in the past, or I have reason to be a little bit salty or frustrated with somebody, but then I'll hear, Angie, get off your ass and go help them, go talk to them, and and I'll be sort of like a stubborn child where I'm like, damn it. But but yeah, you'll get that feeling of like, this isn't gonna give me peace until I do something with this. But it's more of like an internal thing with me. I don't feel compelled to like roll up to somebody and open with the Lord put this on my heart. I find a different way to do it to where it's not fucking weird. You know, it's getting that image of like Teresa Caputo being something like, oh, I'm getting this feeling. I'm like, not right now, God. Or okay, I'm gonna laugh about this now, and it's probably gonna sound a little bit insensitive, but it irked me the day it happened. So I'll share this story real quick. So the day my mom died, it was very sudden and unexpected. I was going over to her apartment because there was a snowstorm anticipated for this area, and I was worried my mom wasn't going to have food enough, and we weren't sure like how long the snowstorm was going to happen. This was years ago. And so I called her the night before and I said, well, don't worry, I'll bring you over some food. And you know, she lived in a retirement type apartment complex, and they all had like a little community there. and I just wanted to make sure she had enough food and everything. And she's like, oh yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. And that night she ended up having a heart attack in her sleep. And so you can imagine it was a whole scene the next day, with it just, I'm talking about it casually now. I'm glazing over some stuff because it was actually maybe the most traumatic day of my life, having to open that door and see my mom's body slumped over the side of her bed. But in the process of, all the EMS and all the people that come over when somebody's died and all that, the I don't know what her title was. She was basically like the super of the building. She pulls me off to the side and she was like, "Can I talk to you in my apartment real quick?" And I thought she wanted to tell me something important about my mom or something like that. And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And she pulls me into her apartment and she's like, I wanted to give you a message from your mom." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And she was like, "You should probably sit down for this." And so I'm like, okay. So I sit down on her couch and she was like, "So your mom came to visit me a few minutes ago." And at this point, there's no way my mom could have been gone for more than a few hours. And my skepticism, I'm not saying that people don't have that ability, but my skepticism says I don't think that this super that had stressed my mom out so many times with her need to like hyper control everything in the building, I don't think that would be the very first person my mom would reach out to from the other side. But I was going to let her say her piece. I didn't interrupt her. And so she tells me this this story about these things my mom wanted me to know. And none of them were particularly relevant to me. But the things that kind of cracked me up and also irritated me a little bit was that she said, um, you know, she said, "Your mom said to talk to you about the horses. She knows you like horses." And I'm like, "Girl, most girls like horses to some extent." And she was like, "She just said to tell you that to tell her baby girl not to worry." And that was like right there. I'm like, my mom's never called me baby girl in her life. It's like, it's not what she called me. But go ahead. But I mean, I didn't tell her that, but I was just like, all right, thank you for the information. And I was like, what was that bullshit? But that was kind of that feeling of when somebody's like, oh, somebody has, got this on my heart to tell you. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But I'm also the type of person that's like, just let them have their thing as long as they're not hurting anybody. And just have a little laugh about it later, I guess. The Wild West that RaptureTok turned into over there on TikTok. There are people that were selling off their cars, quitting their jobs. There was one guy that was talking. I'm not gonna put any of the videos in this video. If you just look up like RaptureTok compilations, you'll probably find them. Don't want to like extra embarrass anybody, but the videos are out there. But there was one guy that was talking about how he quit his job, and then naturally the rapture didn't happen, and he's still here. And he was telling a story about how he was almost 100% sure that this was going to happen, and so he quit his job. He didn't tell them why, I guess, when he first quit, but instead of Jesus taking him up, Jesus instead, I guess, had him do the walk of shame back to his former boss. And then he had to explain to his boss, and he had to say, because he had to go to his boss, and he was talking about how he had to basically get an Uber back to his former employer, and he was late for work that day because I guess he didn't, I don't know, I guess he didn't fully quit because he mentioned that he was late for work, so I guess he didn't entirely tell them that he had quit, because he mentioned that his boss said, "Well, why are you late?" And then he had to tell him the story of like, "Well, I thought the rapture was going to happen," and he explained that his boss like basically laughed in his face, but then said, well, don't worry about it, I got some overtime. And I was just like, that's actually a pretty cool boss. If that's all you have to worry about, that he just gave you a little razzing about it and then gave you overtime to get you back on your feet, that's a pretty cool boss. There was also another guy that said he walked away from a $250,000 tech job. In this job market, he walked away from a $250,000 tech job. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, dude, wait, how are you going to get back into that field? Not just that job, but you're going to have to start from the bottom all over again, man. Which I think he probably understood, because the follow-up video, he did look kind of freaked out. But, yeah, I was just, I was confused about how to feel exactly, because some of it is really laughable, but also you do feel a little bit bad for them, because a lot of this is also kind of the product of the way a lot of organized religion is set up. A lot of it is set up to where people are raised really young with a certain sort of construct of how your faith is supposed to be. It's especially noticeable here in the South, but I even saw it growing up in California with churches out there, where there's just sort of this understood process or routine where and it's not necessarily just with what would you call it, a Presbyterian faith or just standard Christian communities. I've also seen it in Jewish communities, in Catholic communities. I've even seen it in Muslim communities, where it's just this idea where you basically take on the beliefs of your parents and grandparents and forefathers and whatever, and you don't really question the process. You just learn the steps and you go through the routine, and you are expected to be as devout as you possibly can. But when you start questioning stuff, that's when it becomes problematic. But in a way, for example, if my dad had never gone on a question of faith period in his life that took him from the Midwest to California, I wouldn't be here. Which is like, way to make it about yourself, Angie. But it's my channel. I can make it self-centered if I want to. But no, I was thinking about that right now as I was talking about it, so I thought I would throw it in here. So, my parents actually met in San Diego church when my mom was. My dad was actually a little bit younger than my mom. Not like way younger, but my dad was 18. My mom had just turned 20, I think. And my dad had come from Kansas. And my mom had told me this whole story about how he had explained to her that he had a lot of confusion about how he felt religiously. And so he, it was at that time, my parents got married in 71, 72, I can't remember now. But I think when they met, it was like closer to like 68, 69. I don't remember the exact year because I wasn't there. But I think that was the timeline-ish. And so, that like late 60s, early 70s is like a lot of that hippie movement. And when I was a kid, I thought that was like a unique journey for my dad. But getting into history when I got older, I found out that was actually a big movement in the late 60s and early 70s of a bunch of people from the Midwest coming to the West Coast because they felt more constrained in the Midwest regions than in California, naturally, because that's just sort of what happens in Southern California, where everything is a lot looser, the palm trees and the salt air, Everything is just like, yeah, whatever, that's cool, dude. It's just, and if y'all could have seen, I've told in past videos that that was always a back and forth my dad had with me, is that my parents had my brother first, and my brother spent the early years of his life in Kansas because my parents moved back for a while. But then when my brother was in like early school age, my dad, I think he had I think he was in the Navy for a while. He did his like 3 years or whatever. He got out and then he decided to re-enlist. So when he re-enlisted, they asked him to come back to San Diego. And then that's how my parents ended up having me there a few years later. But I've never been, I think I've mentioned this in other videos, I've never been anywhere in the Midwest other than I've been to Chicago a few times and I've been to Detroit a few times. It's the closest I've ever been to anywhere in the Midwest. Like geographically, as far as my travels go, it's a big black hole I've never experienced except through living with my dad. And from what I've heard, well, and I also have a number of Midwestern cousins because for some reason that was a thing. I guess because it was part of this Midwestern pilgrimage to California. A lot of my mom's sisters also. My mom had 6 sisters. A lot of them, I think, except for 1 or 2, I believe. I know one of them married a Texan, and I think another one married like a Northern California guy. Can't remember where all these guys came from. But the majority of my aunts and my mom, I guess, they all married Midwestern guys. And so I have a lot of Midwestern cousins that I had experience with as they came to family reunions in California. But I grew up being Southern California through and through, and it was like it was always sort of a frustrating thing for me and my dad, because I had that like partly he appreciated it because he came to California because he wanted more free thinking and all of that, but also we had this thing between us where I don't know, I guess I seemed like an alien baby to him because I had like I didn't understand the Midwestern culture that I didn't grow up with. But when I got older, I found out that I kind of grew up with it by accident because I would go around my California friends who had absolutely no Midwestern experience at all. And I would do things that were normal around my dad. And my friends would be like, "The hell are you doing?" And then I realized now I was the awkward one because one of my friends would be like, "People don't do that, Angie. What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know." Forgot where I was going with that. Oh, because of the religious thing. But my parents getting together and having me, that happened as a result of having my dad. And it's common with a lot of organized religions. People get into I don't know, this sense of struggle because as people we're naturally curious. It's okay to be curious about things, but for some reason in the religious construct, people are just trained generationally to be like, no, it's not okay. And so I think that kind of lends itself to religious mania being more of a possibility, especially when you put it with social media where, I don't know, I think the longer people get caught up in social media, they lose the ability to interact with the outside world in a healthy way, and they get caught up in what this sort of sanitized version of the world looks like within social media. And so their construct of reality and what makes sense and what's real and all that, it gets misconstrued and just twisted. And that's why I'm kind of fascinated by it, but I also want to be like, go outside and watch the birds, the clouds, the squirrels. I don't know. Just find something that isn't on your phone and just remember what that feels like. and I get it. I get why the appeal of the phone is there, because you know there are a lot of friends that I don't have a ton of friends immediately around me anymore. A lot of my friends that I had in this area, a lot of them have moved away out of state, or you know, out of county or whatever, for different jobs or and whatnot. So I get the appeal of social media, because if you're in one of those kind of situations where your outside community gets less and less, then yeah, I understand the appeal of having the phone there so you can have like that connection somehow. But people also got to learn to be comfortable in their own skin, in their own company. They got to be secure in asking questions they have questions about. You know, if you're curious about things, it's okay to ask. Life is supposed to be a learning experience. You can ask. It's okay. And anybody tells you it's not okay, they're wrong. You are here to learn things. You are here to experience things. Otherwise, why are we doing this? If you're just supposed to live basically whatever life everybody else tells you to have, like, which is why would you be here? If you're just supposed to clock in and clock out precisely how somebody else wants you to do it, and then until you die, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I think there's a lot of people that get so caught up in that mindset of this is the way I was raised and this is how we believe and this has to be true. If you're not raised to be able to question things, and then things don't work out in the way that you would expect within the parameters you were raised with, that can be really earth-shattering. If you're not used to, if you haven't been given the freedom to say, okay, it didn't work out right, but that's all right. What can we learn from this? If you're just out here being like, no, this is how I expect it to happen, I didn't plan for any other thing, what am I supposed to do with this? What is this outcome? What does this mean? And you just lose your shit because you weren't raised in an environment that encouraged critical thinking. That can be scary. While there is some comedic value to this, I mean, I saw one video where this lady was saying, you know, she was telling everybody to bring their chickens over to her house because she talked to her dog and her dog agreed to watch the chickens while everybody was taken away. And I was just thinking, like, I bet he did. I bet he volunteered right away. Or there were other people that were doing videos giving pointers about how to prepare for the actual event of the rapture. That was one of the things that threw me because, you know, when I was taking all those classes when I was a kid, we had to go through all those rapture stories. The thing they kept imprinting upon us and telling in all these stories was that there was no set date. There could be no set date for this rapture to happen. That was part of the scary part of it, was that God was never going to tell you when it was going to happen. There were even some teachings that said that, like, even Jesus himself didn't know, only God knew the day, and he wasn't going to tell anybody until like the second he gave the order for it to go down. That was always the story I was raised with in those rapture classes, is that you weren't going to know. It was just going to happen. And that was also part of the reason why I didn't get too caught up in it, because if God didn't tell you when it was going to happen, even back then as a kid, I felt like, well, there's no reason to get stressed out over it, because if I don't know when it's going to happen, clearly there's nothing I can really do about it. If he wants me to go, he's going to, I felt like it was anything else, like any other sort of, you know, idea about the you know, your soul being taken away or anything like that, is like that idea of like, when it's time, it's time. If he wants me to go, he wants me to go. I might as well just go on living my life and being the best person I can. And to this day, I still live with that belief that I don't worry about things too much. I don't stress about what's on the other side. I worry about while I'm still here, how can I be the best person here? How can I be the most helpful person here? And then whatever happens on the other side, it's going to happen when it's meant to happen. And just like anybody else, I got the time I got. I'm not going to freak out about it. That became even stronger, I think, after I got all my like health diagnoses and stuff. There's an even stronger sense of fragility to everything, where you could be fine or things could go bad wrong. It's just there's a scariness to it, but also that could be true for anybody. So you can't get too caught up in that. Even now, I still sit in the belief of, if I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go. I'm just not gonna freak myself out over it. I'm just, even now, with any challenges I have, I still stand by. I'm going to do the best I can every day. I'm going to be as helpful as I can every day. Be as kind as I can be every day. And I'm not going to freak out about the other stuff. And like, that's not to say I don't have days where I get overwhelmed, but I don't have a super, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I guess I don't have a super strict kind of refined concept. I've told you guys that I've never had a doubt in my mind personally about there being a higher power. I've had too many experiences where things have happened where I tell myself there's no way I could have walked away from that without a little extra help. I've seen friends walk away from stuff where I've said the same thing, where I'm like, how the fuck did they walk away from that? You go through, especially when you work in the medical field too, you go through stuff sometimes where you experience things and you're like, there's no way there wasn't some help behind that. And so there are things that I've witnessed that have, and even when I was a kid, I don't know, I can't explain why it was, but I remember as a kid, I never had any doubt that there was something higher than me around. And that feeling I had when I was a kid, it never left. And there are plenty of days where I will still kind of, in my mind, talk to God, and I'll still be like, God, the hell, man. All right, my phone is starting to chirp at me that I'm running out of storage space. It's going to start playing the award ceremony music at me pretty soon. So I guess it's saying, wrap this up. Anyway, what was I saying? So I was saying about the, what I was getting at is like this whole RaptureTok thing. I was seeing these videos where people were doing these tips, basically, where they were saying, okay, to prepare for the day of the rapture, people were saying that you need to strip down and get naked. And it's advised that you take some Imodium so that, you don't make an embarrassment of yourself as you're getting shot up into the sky, and that, we don't know what the body is going to do. So just in case, just for safety, go ahead and take some Imodium pre-hand. And I was watching these videos going, what are you going on about? And then the people, when the rapture didn't happen, and they'd come back and they'd be like, I don't understand how I heard God so wrong. How could I get it wrong? And I'm just sitting here like, if you're not using critical thinking, it's good possibility you're going to hear him wrong. I think those things go hand in hand. And that's kind of like when the rapture got rescheduled, and people were coming back and saying, well, it makes sense if you think about it, because, God didn't know that there was a switch between the Julian and the Gregorian calendars, so the dates got mixed up. And I was just putting all of these storylines together as far as like, God's going to need you to get naked because he said that they can't translate the clothes that we have here on earth. So yeah, it's easier for him if you just strip bare. And then also there's a problem with the calendar. So that's why the days got mixed up. But it's easy. They figured it out. It's fine. It's rescheduled. And I was just sitting there thinking, when I worked in healthcare and we had patients that would from time to time pass away on us, we never had to strip them down when they started giving the sign that they were getting close to transferring over. There was no procedure for, well, we better get them butt naked real quick, because it's just understood in biology that the soul just goes when it goes. There's no, like, you can prepare a little bit if you kind of get a sense of when it's probably coming, and you can do some preparation. That's why in the medical field they say now might be a good time to say your piece and all that. Like, there are little things like that, but there's no procedure that I remember being taught where it's like, well, you better strip them down real quick. We've got, like, I don't know, 2 minutes. We want them to send them over right. that wasn't taught in any of the classes I was in. So I found that interesting, and that was a learning experience for me. And also the the calendar thing. I was just thinking, like, okay, I was thinking back to what do the hymns say? The King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the guy that said, "I will bring rivers to the desert." This same omnipresent, all-knowing guy, he can't figure out clothes and calendars on this mortal plane. That's where we keep tripping up God himself. I just, that's what I'm saying about critical thinking. Like, this whole thing got messed up because William Shatner would not leak to God how teleportation actually works with the clothes on. And so, God's just up there doing the best he can. One account I would recommend you watch, because he just has some funny stories about this, was Mischa. What was his? I've seen his stuff up on Instagram before. I was trying to remember, I wrote down his actual account. I think it's like Bestie Mischa. I'll try to, if I can find it somewhere on here, I'll link it down below. But he's got a really funny story about how one of his subscribers reached out to him, and he tells this whole story about how she basically DM'd him and said, I've always found you funny, and I think you're great, and I would love it if you could watch my dog after I get raptured. And he said, he messaged back and said, "Are you saying I am not worthy of being raptured?" And her response was kind of like, well, yeah, kind of. I guess because he's gay. I don't know what her thinking was, that I guess that was the idea behind it, was that because he was gay, he wasn't, or is gay, I should say, not like he was, because he is gay, that somehow he wasn't worthy to get raptured, but he seemed cool enough to watch her dog. And he was talking about how, like, that's kind of messed up, but he also had a thing in one of his TikToks where he was talking about this whole rapture thing, and he was like, this all just feels very disorganized. It's just like, I know, right? So yeah, I'll try to see if I can find some of his stuff about this and link it down below. But yeah, I would recommend watching some of his, because his rapture stories are pretty funny. And yeah, it's really laughable, except for some of the sadder ones. I did hear the one story about the woman who was really excited for the rapture because her husband had passed away not too long ago, and she thought this was her chance to see him again. And that story, and when it didn't happen, she got really upset. That story kind of broke my heart. And then the other one was all these stories coming out about people just, like, basically relinquishing their kids to friends and neighbors, and there was that one lady who just straight up tried to hand her kids over to like voluntarily give them to CPS. And like it wasn't sad for me as far as like the parents, because I feel like if you're that easily swayed to walk away from your kids, you don't need to have those kids anyway. But I felt bad for the kids, because that's got to be traumatic. I mean, yeah, I don't like they're gonna have this with them the rest of their lives now that their parents. I mean, I'm guessing in their parents' mixed up minds they were doing something right. But I feel so bad for those kids because like as someone who grew up in a messy household, I can tell you that like I know that feeling of kids can't help the environment they grow up in. Yes, you can heal from it and have wonderful experiences as an adult, but as a child, you are very limited to what you can do for yourself. You're just sort of at the mercy of the adults around you. And that can be really traumatic. Sometimes it can work out great, but you know, it's always a kind of a crapshoot when you're in messy situations and you're a kid just trying to do the best you can and you're confused and you don't understand like what you're getting. Because imagine like being a kid and you're suddenly getting handed off to people and you don't know what the hell's going on. I imagine maybe the parents tried to do like explanatory, hey, this is why we're doing this type of conversations, but like how well is a kid gonna understand that? Really? Like I don't know. That's just too confusing and traumatic. So like those stories were not really laughable to me. Those made me really sad. But I would say that maybe one good thing that came out of all of this is that I did see that some people were coming back after like the whole second rapture didn't happen. Which, by the way, I did see one video where this girl was explaining that, well, what if the rapture did happen, but like it just took the souls and the bodies that were still here, they got refilled with demons. Like that was one theory that was going around. What if that happened? And I was just like, girl, what? This is why I'm telling people to go outside. This is what happens when you get too caught up in the blue light. Yeah, it's just a lot of messy people that just need to take some deep breaths. But I was gonna say, one of the good things I saw coming out of this was I did see people making videos where, you know, the second rapture didn't happen, and then they were coming back and they were doing videos where they were saying, what does this mean about my faith? What do I really feel? Because some people were admitting that a lot of what they thought they believed in was based in what they were raised with and their community. And, you know, there were people coming in and coming back and saying, what if I was wrong? What if, what if I didn't read deep enough into this? And seeing those, I kind of felt like, yes, that's good. Critical thinking is good. Like, I get that it's scary. It kind of feels like, you know, when I remember experiencing this to some extent, not necessarily from a religious aspect, but I remember certain things like my parents would talk about where they, you know, it was a belief for them, stories they believed in and stuff, maybe with history or something like that, and they would share it with us. And when I was a kid, I, you know, naturally had that thought of like, oh yeah, well, of course my parents would know, they're adults. And my brother and I have talked about this sometimes where we kind of share stories of like, God, they had that way wrong. But yeah, maybe like historical stories where that's just the way your parents believe and you don't question it when you're a kid, because why would you? It's just, you want to believe your parents, you want to have faith that they know what they're talking about. But then when you get older and like, I don't know, maybe you read a book on something, or you take a college course or something like that, and you have that smack in the face of like, it almost feels like your parents were lying to you, but maybe it was because that was the way they were taught, or whatever reason, you get this realization of like your parents being wrong about something for so many years. It is kind of a shock to the system of like, what do I do with this information now? Well, it just alters all this perception I had in my life before. But you do get around it eventually. Like, you do get comfortable with like, okay, well, I guess I have all this space and these resources to think for myself and make my own opinions. That could be a thing. And like, yeah, that can be a thing. That should be a thing. But it is scary. I get that, to go against your family and your upbringing, but like it needs to be done though. And it's not easy to be done, but it does need to be done. You need to figure out things for yourself. You need to question things for yourself. And I think a lot of this fervor, this mania, a lot of it stems from people not being raised in spaces where that was encouraged or accepted. And people just go along with what their families or their communities encourage in them because it's less scary. I get that. But then you get into this mess where, it makes you, I guess, like I'm saying, I guess in a way it's good because it makes you question your faith. And I think having questions of faith is a good, healthy thing to have. I know it's taught in some religious circles. I am not one who actually believes that the Bible is the literal word of God. I know there are places that teach that. I never took it that way. I think that, again, it's meant more as examples, things to think about. But there are people that take stuff in there painfully literally, and they end up getting hurt and confused in life. And I don't know, I've always taken it more as like, I think you're supposed to take stuff that's in that book, think about it, apply it to your particular era of life, and see how you can translate some of those stories to be the best human, the best Christian, whatever that you can be. That's how I always took it. But on one hand, I feel kind of bad with just these people getting this sort of religious and culture shock of disbelief. But I don't want people to go out there and take this as like, oh my God, now God doesn't exist. I'm like, no, I think you just read the room wrong. And I think also part of it could be that I think people are not encouraged enough to have more of a lighthearted approach to religion, to where, not that you shouldn't take it seriously, but like you should be allowed to laugh. You should be allowed to have jokes with your maker, and have little inside jokes with your spirit team and all of that. Like that's how I get through my day. Like I told you guys, like I have plenty of stuff that could just crush me emotionally some days, where I could get really mad about it and say, oh God, Lord, why do you test me? But I find it easier on my soul personally if I do have days where I feel pretty crushed spiritually, but a lot of days it's easier for me to just be like, the hell, man. And some people get offended when I tell them that, but I was also raised with the concept, and a lot of churches raise this with, that God made you in his image. But some churches make it specific to like, they have an image of you, of how you should act, and then they try to umbrella it with like, oh yeah, God made you in his image. But they have a specific image they want you to fall into. And I always fall back on, well, you taught me that, church leaders, you taught me God made me in his image. Okay, well, apparently he liked this image. He liked this particular model a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit sarcastic. I feel like God just said, you know what? It's going to be really boring down there if I don't put in a few good redheads to just keep it lively. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that are going to take it too seriously. They're going to lose their sense of fun. I'm going to need to throw some redheads in there. And so, like, we take it on our shoulders to be like, okay, no, I get it. I get it. Like, faith is good, but it's okay to laugh. It's really okay. I can tell you there's no eternal damnation to having a little fun with the guy. And I've had plenty of people in religious communities be like, oh my God. But y'all, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still having fun as much as I can day to day. But yeah, there are times where I kind of ask that to my spirit team or God or whoever, or I'm just like, the hell, man? You don't think you're going a little hard on me today? And a lot of times I get the answer back like, you got it. What are you talking about? You're gonna be fine. And sure enough, I am. I'm just gonna complain about it the whole time. But yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting topic to me. I'm just kind of religiously rambling at this point. So I guess I will finish up this video before I run out of space, before they do that get off the stage music on me. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. I'll try to edit this down so the rambling isn't too obnoxious. But yeah, thanks for coming in and hanging out for a spell. And we will talk soon. Or, I'll give you a little bit of a break since I rambled on here so much, but pretty soon. We will talk soon. All right. Good night, honey badgers.